All right, we're going to talk about how to use the serger and how to use it safely and how you put in your fabric in order to serge successfully. First of all, you sit down at the serging table, make sure that you bring a pair of shears with you. There are 3 major rules for keeping you and your fabric safe. Those are posted on the tables around the serging areas. Number 1, keep your fingers away from the knife. When you sit down at the serger, there's this little part right here that is the knife. So if I'm going to open this up, I'll twist the knife out of the way so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. There's the knife. So when you are serging, keep your fingers away from this area. Do not get too close to where this area is here. So number 1, keep your finger away from the knife. Number 2, do not lift up the presser foot on these machines. They do have presser feet that lift up and down, and for some serging techniques you would need to lift it up. But for our purposes, always leave it down, because if someone sits down to serge and the presser foot is up, it could cause some real problems and the threading gets all undone. So second rule, do not lift up the presser foot. You don't need to. Final rule is you're going to leave behind a nice long thread tail or a thread chain at the end. This will help keep it from getting unthreaded, and if you've noticed on the sergers, there are 4 sets of thread going through this machine. So it does take a little while to rethread if you do it wrong. So now let's practice serging, learning all the techniques. We have a couple different ways to serge. If you sit down to serge a sample that has a stitching line for you to follow, you're going to line up your stitching line with this red mark on the presser foot, and that will give you a nice clean cut along the edge of your fabric. So again, this stitch line follows this red line. So all we need to do is kind of push it up under the foot. Remember, don't lift up the foot. We're going to keep our fingers away from the knife, and we're going to slowly start the foot pedal to get our fabric started. So you can kind of see it takes a minute to get started. These machines do go fast, so be careful what you're doing. When you get to the end, keep serging until you have your thread tail left over. Take your shears and trim it so the thread tail is left behind, and make sure you trim the other side. The serging should never go over the straight stitch. There should be a little gap of fabric in between the serging and the stitching line that you did on your machine. So this is the first type of serging. When you have a stitch line to follow, that's where you line it up. It lines up with the red mark on the presser foot. Sometimes when we serge, we just want to serge around the edge to keep it from fraying or raveling like this. There's no stitch line to follow, so in that case, we want to cut off as little as possible. What I would do is line up the edge of your fabric with this little ledge. So we're going to place the fabric on the ledge and do the same thing. Keep your fingers away from the knife and slowly serge all the way down, and continue to serge until you have a tail left over. This will trim very little of your fabric, but it will still serge that edge so that you have a nice clean finish. Make sure that you clean up all of your scraps and loose threads and put them in the garbage before moving on. And that's it.